Hi, friends. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hello APGD, a neighborhood podcast about the Audubon Park Garden District in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Michael Lothrop, and today we'll be speaking with City of Orlando's District 3 Commissioner, Robert Stuart. Be sure to follow ORL District 3 on Instagram for City Council updates and other news, and contact Robert through email at robert.stewart@orlando.gov. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd like to be a sponsor, please feel free to message me on Instagram at HelloAPGDPod. Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you in part by Trevor Brown, Audubon Park resident and trusted Central Florida realtor with Fannie Hillman and Associates, proudly serving their clients for over 40 years. For listings, market trends, helpful home buyer and seller tips, email directly to trevor@fanniehillman.com or find him on Instagram at Trevor Brown Realtor. And with me today is the City of Orlando District 3 Commissioner, Robert Stuart. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be here.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you're very busy.
Oh, not too busy for you.
Well, I appreciate that. I've been enjoying your social media lately. You have the coffee talks with Robert, and you keep us up to date on what happens during the course of the meetings. Those happen monthly.
Well, they're usually bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly. Okay.
But during the summer, they've been once a month because of the scheduling.
Gotcha. Yeah. Summer things kind of slow down
Yeah,
here.
and in September, there's actually 4 meetings in September. And then
Wow.
goes back to 2 meetings because September is the budget meetings for the city.
That's the end of the fiscal year is September 30th.
Right. So
Okay.
we're doing budget for the following year.
Yeah. So this is an especially busy time. So absolutely. Thank you. And it's always nice to see you and Ann at Audubon Park events.
We love being there.
Yeah.
Audubon Park is it's a little bit special to me. When I was growing up in high school, I dated a couple of girls that lived over in Audubon Park.
Okay.
And their parents were engineers that moved over here to either work at the air base or Martin Marietta. And so every time I drive down either Orinal or Tanager, I remember the girls I used to date.
And those houses are still there.
The houses are still there.
Isn't that great?
It's just great.
That's amazing.
The trees have grown up a little bit more than they used to be, but the houses are still there.
Yeah, yeah. And you, born and raised in College Park, and so you were here pre-Disney, which is kind of incredible, right? I mean, just to see all of that change.
Well, to show you, I hate to tell people how old I am, but I actually graduated high school before Disney was here. Okay. So I'm one of those members of the group on Facebook of, what is Orlando before Disney?
Yeah.
So I remember a lot of those things. One guy made a comment to me about I-4 and the expansion of I-4 and all the I-4 Ultimate, and I said I remember when the original I-4 was built. So he went, "How long have you been around? You don't look that old." And I go, "Well, I think that's a compliment."
That's a big compliment. Absolutely. That's incredible. Yeah. And I mean, just at that age with Disney going in, were you pretty excited about it when it first opened?
I mean, the whole process, starts in 64 and 65 and makes the decision and then starts to go forward. And so we're all kind of excited about it. I used to work at my father's store. My father had a store in downtown Orlando called George Stewart Incorporated. And one of the things he started to do was start to sell topographical maps. Now, all that stuff done then is now done at your fingertips on your phone. Sure. But you had to have the proper range and township of a piece of property, and you had to have the proper location. So as people are starting to get some excitement that Disney may be coming to Florida, not just Orlando, but just to Florida. The rumor mill went out that it was going to go down near Lake Okeechobee towards West Palm Beach. And so we knew that rumor because people were coming in and ordering topographical maps for the area because they wanted to buy land around where they were going to buy it. And so by the time they announced, we had all the maps of Lake Okeechobee, and they didn't do anybody any good because they opened up where they did.
Huh.
So, but anyway, seeing all that was just remembering 535 and imagining what it was like before, and then now, and they still have some more changes they have to do out there. That's going to be. That's going to just make it look a little bit like Southern California, unfortunately, but they have the land to do it. So.
Right. And so you grew up basically in this small business environment. You're, as you said, your father had a very successful office supply business for 51 years.
Yeah, he passed away in 1976. We had gone to college. There were 5 kids that had already graduated from school, and we had come back to work in the family business. That was our plan. I was going to come back and run advertising, and my sister was going to help, and we were going to come back. So when we got back to the company, it wasn't quite the same. Dad wanted to do some other stuff with direct sales and outdoor sales. He was really basically a retailer where you come to him.
Sure.
And he wanted to create a whole area of selling out in the community, essentially. And so I took over that area, and then he passed away about 4 months later. And so then we ran the business for about 15 years up until 1990.
Wow.
And until the office depots and the landscape put us out of business.
So this was the late 90s, essentially, when...
Late 80s.
The 80s, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah. So during that 15 years, what were some of the lessons that you took away from that maybe have helped you in your role as commissioner?
Well, my brother and I used to tease because, people would ask, do you have a master's? And our answer is we have a master's of hard knocks. Yeah. We had to run a business. So at the age of 22, I was hiring salespeople all over from the Southeast. I had to end up having a crew very quickly of 13 or 14 outside salespeople. Mm-hmm.
That's a very young age to have all that responsibility. You had to grow up quickly. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm 23 or 24 years old. Now, I had worked in the company, but we've always worked alongside Dad or worked alongside one of my brothers or my uncle. And so when all that was happening, it's a different kind of environment. Yeah. So we each kind of migrated to a different portion of the company. Jacob ran the advertising for us. My sister and the younger sister came in and did the retail store sales essentially. Charlie became president of the company, and then George did some work with me with consulting in the outdoor sales. Wow. Interesting part. I mean, we all have different things that. When we look back on our life, that I think are just kind of cool. Yeah. So when they're trying to put the space shuttle up, they don't quite know how to do it. There ends up being a strike from the engineers who are putting in all the information into the critical path of getting the space shuttle off the ground, essentially. And I thought that's kind of cool. But we sold a piece of equipment that was a word processing equipment. It was the first software-based word processing equipment in the country. Oh, wow. And it did a lot of neat stuff. It did what you do on your phone today, but in 1977, 78, it was a big deal.
That was cutting edge, of course.
So the desktop unit sold for about $15,500. Wow. And it does stuff today that I think is really kind of unique, but at the same time, you could work in word processing, you could work in a calculating, at the time, SuperCalc as opposed to Excel, and you had 4 or 5 other programs, including communicating, and it figured out how to do it. The guy who invented this was a guy who actually created the linear word processing system. Wow. And he went to Lanier and said, hey, I think we can do this with software instead of having to do this with hardware. And they said, no, we like it the way it's gone. So he goes, well, then buy me out. So he started a company in Montreal. We had the state responsibility for the state of Florida, so we had 5 or 6 branches throughout Florida, which was under my responsibility. But one day we had to take over the equipment because it will sort out a critical path for the space shuttle. Wow! So they're having a negotiations, and I mean I'm not a strike breaker, so don't get me wrong. But the director of NASA calls me up and said, "I hear you got this machine that'll do this." And I said, "Well, I think so. I mean, I think what you're asking. Let me bring it over."
Sure.
And so I rush over with one of the machines in the back to meet the director of NASA.
Wow.
I'm like 24 years old. I mean,
Wow.
I get a speeding ticket on the way over.
Oh, of course.
Guy pulls me over
Yeah.
on Highway 50 and says, cop says, "Well, you're going too fast." And I said, "I understand, but I know you're not going to believe this, but in the back of my car is equipment that I'm taking over to the director of NASA who's working on the critical path for the space shuttle."
Yeah.
And he says, "Yeah, sure."
You're part of the space race.
And I said, "Look, are you going to write me a ticket?" And he said, "Well, yes, I am." I said, "Then write quickly because I need to go." And so he showed up, and they ended up buying like 12 or 15 of these units. Now,
Wow.
they're 15,000 apiece.
Yeah, and back then,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
And so we then they then brought secretaries in and created the critical path. And when they finished the contract negotiations, they then moved it over, so nothing got held up in the space shuttle. And I played this little kind of tiny part of that, which is kind of a neat little story that I share with my family.
Yeah, what a cool piece of history. I
Yeah.
mean, on top of just being like a part of the community, I mean, I was reading online just about the shop and how highly regarded it was. And, people were really heartbroken when the store closed, but that was sort of the landscape. And I wonder, in that, having that background in small business, and District 3 is comprised of majority of small businesses, really. I mean, if you think about kind of the scale of Orlando, the northern part of the city that District 3 comprises of is, College Park and Audubon Park and Baldwin Park and Ivanhoe. Everybody is like making it happen in this, as they compete with these big box stores and online retailers. And, a lot of it is kind of lifestyle shops and restaurants and things like that, things that, you can't order on Amazon. You're not going to get that same experience, and they're thriving because they specialize in that way, and people are very devoted to these shops, which is a beautiful thing to see.
Well, I've been committed to small business since I've worked in small business. I've worked in my dad's till 1990, so that put me there 15 years after college, and then 4 or 5 years before I graduated from college. So I'd been around small business a lot. And in the role that we played, we also took care of small business because small business was buying product from us. And so we had this kind of double kind of connection to them, which was really neat.
That makes sense.
But District 3 is an interesting part. And these individual, at the time, would be just basically commercial districts, not Main Streets. Main Streets kind of has a whole new flavor to it. But these commercial districts develop, and they all ended up developing based around the community that was there, which is really, really neat.
Yeah.
Now, the strange thing is, when you look at my district as a whole, I have the third or fourth largest employer in the entire county in my district, a small little hospital called Advent Health.
Right.
So, I have this kind of interesting kind of balance I have to figure out because what they're doing is so really neat in healthcare, and they're bringing in a ton of people. But at the same time, I want those people to see that these neighborhoods are unique and different, and they carry their own type of message to the community. When we started the Main Streets, 3 of the first 4 Main Streets were in my district. And the reason for that is that being a little bit older, a little bit more mature, they were a little better organized. And being better organized was important for us at the time we did Main Streets to make sure it moved very quickly.
Right.
So College Park was probably the most organized because it had been around the longest. The second probably was Audubon, and the third was Ivanhoe. It had gone through a couple of transitions. But those 3 really have just kind of these neat little vibes of each one.
Yeah.
And the leadership that we've had in Audubon has continued that kind of vibe. Kind of a mid-century modern meets a community farm kind of idea. You get engaged in the community, you get to know your neighbors, and all of a sudden, you're part of a community the same way that I was when I grew up. Now, let me kind of take a quick sidebar.
Sure.
I think when you look at our communities, the strength of our community really is in the faith component and in the schools, and I should probably the strength, probably not the right word, the stability of the community.
Sure.
So when we have strong schools, you have people who want to be in the neighborhood, and when they want to be in the neighborhood, they don't necessarily want to leave. But we were shopping yesterday in Audubon, and there's 4 or 5 shops I just absolutely love, and I love the owners, and you get a chance to walk in and speak to the owner. And
they're actually there, right?
Yeah.
They don't just have their employees. Yeah.
Deep down inside, I know that I probably could find the item cheaper if I wanted to, but I have to find the actual item and do the search, and then it has to be shipped to me, and then
Sure.
there's a.
And in some cases, these are like very unique items too that you can only get at these shops.
I mean, like the Lovely or Primrose Shop, or even the guy that does the fly fishing.
Yes, Orlando Outfitters.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't wait to talk to TJ. Yeah, that's such a cool place.
It's just when you look at that and you go, this is kind of neat. Now, would I like to have more other things in there? Yeah, but I think the community kind of brings that.
Yeah.
And when the community brings it, then they become more supportive of it.
It's a very good mix, and I think Best of Orlando Weekly came out recently, and I think we were maybe number 2 in the shopping districts, which was very cool. It's like people do recognize this as both a destination because of Lou Gardens and just like a lifestyle destination. People can hang out and shop and have a great meal here. There's just so many options, and it has transformed so much just in the 20 years that I've lived in the neighborhood, and seeing that has been just remarkable. I mean, absolutely the way that you want a neighborhood to go, and the idea and concept of Main Street, it can be used sometimes as sort of like to gain points or whatever, but it really does mean something here. Like it really is something that is like people are they value what we have here, and they're connected to it, and they support it, and that's what keeps the whole thing going. I mean, it's wonderful.
Well, the component of Main Street really is to not only promote small business, it's also to promote a theme of the area that people kind of buy into.
Like branding and recognition, right?
Exactly. And I think that I think is really kind of cool.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, no offense to the leadership that we've had for 11 or 12 years, and then Jen coming in 10 years ago. After having been around for a long time, after having shopped here in the 60s and 70s, I had some ideas about what Audubon Park ought to be. Because you kind of go through and you kind of figure it out, and but in working with the leadership that y'all have had, I've had a chance to say, let me just back off and turn and go, instead of saying, hey, go do this. Yeah, I back off and go, what do you need?
Interesting.
And when I began to do that years ago, I began to see kind of the identity flourish. And what's neat is seeing other main streets know and look at that identity, and then seeing people come in. I pick on Ivanhoe as an example. When they brought in the yard, one of the things they did was they talked to the entire community about what they would want there. And they had the right to build the project, but they also wanted to make sure it identified with the neighborhood, because it literally is in the center of Ivanhoe.
Right.
And so I think the same thing kind of applies over here, is that when you bring in the Audubon K8, how do you engage that into the community? Right. And Audubon's an interesting area.
It is.
Because when you look at the street of Corrine, you end up having unincorporated Orange County on part of it, Winter Park on part of it, and you also have the core, most of it, a city of Orlando. And up until just a couple of months ago, it was a county road. So we had a lot of issues trying to get county stuff done until they finally gave the road back over to the city for us to start to do stuff on it. And we're moving forward on that project, which I'm really kind of excited about. But it's neat to see that identity, and it's a challenge too, because not everybody buys into the identity. But I think the strength has been attracting the restaurants attracting people who want to come and hang out here.
Right.
And I think that really creates that kind of vibe, and the kind of indie vibe, the kind of mid-century modern, the kind of we like the new stuff and we like the old stuff too. It's really been kind of neat to watch it develop.
It's become exactly what I love about other cities when I travel. It's just like you go downtown and it's a different thing altogether. Usually, even in other cities, when you get into the neighborhoods kind of on the outskirts, like that's where the real culture is. And, the really cool stuff, because it's like, downtown it's a lot of businesses and, things like that. And ours in particular is a lot of nightlife things. Not as much shopping, there's not a great mix of things downtown, but as a result, the neighborhoods have kind of taken the helm on that. And it's been really cool to see, the Main Street program flourish the way that it has. And I think that has been so transformative to the city and the identity of the city, and kind of growing outside of what, Disney sort of had already created as a culture and a destination, because everybody comes to Orlando eventually, as it's been said.
I think also in this area specifically, there's the idea of kind of being indie, and I'll say a little bit retro.
Yeah.
It's also the idea of how do I reuse the buildings that we have.
Right.
I mean, we've taken a place that used to sell plumbing products, and that's now become one of the top destinations for beer in our community. Just a really neat kind of thing.
Right. Is that Weathermasters was plumbing? It was AC and plumbing.
AC and plumbing.
Yeah.
And it was. I mean, I can remember when it was just boarded up.
Yeah.
And a family owned it, and it took an idea of saying, hey, look, we could do something else with it. Let's see if we can make it work. I can remember going to worship services at Corrine Baptist Church. Okay. And then when John Rife took it over and made East End, I thought, this is the craziest thing in the whole world, John. And he would show me these pictures on his phone of where he had gone in Seattle and several other places, and said, this is what the inside's going to look like, Robert. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. You got walls here in Sunday school classes. How in the world are you going to pull this off? He goes, trust me, here's what it's going to look like. And I said, okay, fine. What, if you think you can pull it off, that's great. And now it's become really a neat destination, not just for the community, but for the entire area to go over there. And I mean, it's got, the neatest cheese place in the whole world. It's got some of the best cookies you've ever had in your whole life. It's got some of the neatest chicken biscuits you could ever have. I mean, and all that in this idea of being cooperative and being in retrofitting what's currently here to make it fresh for the future.
Absolutely. And it's funny because that idea of East End Market from that Seattle market, it's a shop called Melrose Market. So it wasn't Pike's Place, it was a smaller market. And so Gabby is actually the co-founder of East End, and the idea came from shopping in that market. Yeah. And they had this tremendous cheese shop and butcher shop and bread and a restaurant in it. And it was like, we could have this. And then her and John were working on this idea, and then we were kind of like looking at this building that just sat dormant, and it was like, why couldn't it be there? And it's just interesting how things all kind of, with enough care and, resources and time and attention, how things come together. And it's interesting, the concept that I learned recently about how a neighborhood turns over essentially every 60 years, because residents that move in initially, if they're in their 20s and 30s, there's a time when, people are passing on or like moving out, like different things happen. So it changes over, and a lot of young people moved in because of the schools. And that was even pre when the K through 8 opened. So for a while, this neighborhood has been in the process of that sort of turnover. And so you see a lot of younger families here, which has changed the landscape altogether too.
We've seen that I'm born and raised in College Park. So we've seen that in College Park, where now all of my friends are raising their children. And then now it's become all my children's friends are raising their children.
Isn't that cool?
And I'll tell you a short story is that John had these pictures to show me because he just had to show it to me. Now, I understand that John's mother was the sweetheart of our Key Club at Edgewater High School when I was a sophomore and she was a senior. Wow. So I've known Shelley for 50 years.
Yeah.
So here's this kind of guy who, Shelley's my mom, and go, okay, great. Well, tell me how things are going, and he goes, well, let me show you this idea. And the funny, I thought the idea was really neat, but the coolest part was he had this panoramic program for photography on his phone. Okay, and
that was back before we had that in all the phones.
Exactly. And you had to get the right panoramic.
There was an app for that.
That's right. And you picked it up, and you just kind of went like this around a room, and it just kind of took shots as you needed to. And the idea was, in fact, I still like the idea better than what we currently have because it takes the whole scheme of things. So when he was showing to me, it was like sitting in the middle of this thing because you could see everything that all around, as opposed to just kind of this one horizontal view. Yeah. It was up and down, and I thought, and I said, John, that's really cool. Where'd you get that program from? He goes, here, I'll send it over to you. And he did. And every time I use that program, and I still do, every time I use that program, I think of John and think of
that was
the
thing that
connection,
stood out.
The connection here, which is just kind of another little sidebar story.
So you grew up in a large family, 6 kids total. You have a twin sister. And so that was basically your original community. I mean, that's like, a lot of personalities, a lot of talents, things like that. I understand your brother George was the youngest city commissioner in Orlando back in 1972. And so was that an influence? I mean, obviously, it must have been some kind of influence to you becoming commissioner as well.
Well, it always is. I mean, George served as commissioner for 6 years and then became a state senator and served until 1990 as a state senator. And then eventually ran for governor and when Lawton Childs ran, moved over to insurance commissioner. So I've had a lot of that experience in the politic world. But I had never thought of becoming a city commissioner. But the cool thing I share is that the first vote I cast as an 18-year-old was for my brother.
That's cool.
And because I had turned 18 after the previous year's fall elections. And the next at the time, the next election was a city election, and it was going to be in September the following year. So I get a chance to vote for George.
So you get to hold that over him that you helped him get elected.
If it wasn't for my vote, he would have never gotten elected. The funny part is that from a little sidebar is that that summer I worked up in upstate New York raising some money at a country club up there. And so I worked for George's campaign for about a week, kind of helped him out, went away to upstate New York, came back and was here for a week at the end of the campaign. So,
oh, wow.
So I really didn't help him out very much, but I take credit for it.
I think rightly so.
But the interesting part is I knew how the city worked. I knew who the people were. We had, when George left the city, while he was with the city, our company decided to not sell to the city. Okay. And so when he left the city in 1978, we then started back in selling to the city. By that time, I was the outside salesperson, so I knew what was going on. And we helped furnish the original OPD headquarters that we've just recently torn down. That's now going to become part of that Amway Center over there. So I remember that was built. We helped furnish it.
Wow.
So I have a lot of connections inside because it's really kind of our town.
Yeah.
So when years later, when somebody contacts me and says, "I want you to run for city commissioner," I go, "I'm not running for city commissioner. I got plenty of things to do in my life. I don't need one more."
Who was that advised you on that?
I'm not telling it.
Oh, okay.
I'm telling public.
All right.
But what I felt like is I felt like that you needed to have somebody who was a native, who understood the community, but who also understood where communities can go. And I get a little offended when people come from outside the community and tell me how to go do stuff.
Sure.
I think there's great talent in our community. I mean, I really do.
Yeah.
And we ought to take advantage of that.
Right.
And sometimes we don't think that, and we hire a guy to run an organization from Midwest, and they come down and bring these ideas, and some of those ideas are good, but you have to kind of get to know the community as well.
Yeah. I think diversity is important, but also kind of context and history is important as well. That institutional knowledge, really a caring heart and being an empathetic person, which, I get that from you as well. And I think that is, a leadership quality that is absolutely crucial. And it's something that, I think you grew up here, so you really do care about this area, and you have seen a lot of changes, and you understand what it means to serve, and you've done a lot of that. You're the executive director of a nonprofit. Yeah,
retired now. I retired after 25 years. So
congratulations.
A couple of years ago, I retired in the middle of COVID. Our whole world.
That's tough.
COVID is.
Yeah, I know. It's like before and after, right?
Exactly. My brain goes, okay, what was before and what was after? So before I was executive director, and after I'm not. So sometime during COVID, I retired.
Sure.
And had a good time.
Yeah.
I will tell you that, it's part of what fuels me is my faith to serve. That's kind of part of it. The other part is that I think we've got good people. I say this kindly, and I don't want people to take it in the wrong way. When I joined and people started calling me commissioner, I was a little bit embarrassed.
Yeah, I get that.
Because and I think people want to honor that role that you play, and
of course.
And but that's not. I got elected to a position to do something. I don't need to have another title. I got there because I wanted to accomplish something, and at the same time, I wanted the community to feel like that they could call somebody and ask them a question, and not have this idea that they were going to have a preconceived answer. And so
that go through that hierarchy, right? Yeah. That you want to be approachable.
So I made a big deal out of when people write me, I respond. If I know the answer, I will respond. If I don't know the answer, I'll send somebody else who will. I believe that you as citizens, I think the city staff works for you. I work for you in a sense, but at the same time, all the staff, they don't work for me.
Right.
In the city of Orlando, we elect our CEO, who's the mayor, and everybody works for the mayor except 6 people, and those 6 people are the commissioners. Even my staff works for the mayor, and because he is the CEO, and Orange County and Orlando are different than all the rest of the municipalities and jurisdictions around here. We elect our CEO, and so the idea is that if that's the case, then when I go to talk to somebody, I'm just like you, and I want to advocate for you, but I also want you to understand that this is your city. So help us get engaged and go do stuff. There are people that have been before me that have said, look, if you want something, you call me, I'll take care of it. Well, answers, I don't think that's a good idea to how to run a city. I want you to call me, I'll tell you how to take care of it. If you're having an issue with the police department, we have a process for that.
Right.
If you aren't getting the quality care that the mayor has said, and I have said, that the professional care, that's where I want to step in. So I'm not the guy that you call if somebody is violating the law or violating the code enforcement issue. I'm not the guy. I'm going to teach you where to go with that.
Yeah.
If you don't get the quality of support that you think you deserve, now call me, because that's the goal. My job is the role of advocacy and policy, and so I want to advocate for our community, and my job is policy. My job's not management.
Right.
Management is somebody else. So when you have an issue with a lake, what I want to do is I want to get you with the person in charge of the lake. I want you all to connect because she thinks that she works for you. And that's a good thing.
Right.
And then let me kind of help shepherd the process and then go to the next process so that we create a citizenry that's engaged in the process. That's what I love about Main Streets. Because Main Streets are this kind of quasi group that gets engaged in what's going on in the community.
Right.
They get engaged from code enforcement to bringing in new businesses to helping design a road.
Without being direct employees of the city.
Exactly.
So in the same way, Main Street organizations are advocates for the neighborhood, for the district.
There's an old movie, I always forget all the other details except the end, where Michael Douglas is the president of the United States, and he is going after
An American president.
That was
It's a great movie.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends it saying, being a citizen is hard because you have to be engaged. And that really is my heart. The answer is, I want you to be engaged. And if you don't feel like you're engaged, or if you don't feel like you're getting the quality of support that you think you deserve, now call me. Because I think that's important.
Right.
The other part is that we're not going to agree. How we do stuff is different. The issues that I have to take into account 50,000 of my closest friends.
Right.
So we have to figure it out.
And you're not going to please everybody,
Right.
but you have to consider everybody at the same time.
So process to me is important. Everybody kind of is engaged.
Sure.
But at the same time, I believe that when you get through with it, if everybody is engaged, you have a better project.
Right.
Because if you want to do this and somebody else wants to do that, and this gets moving forward, then the people on that, they're angry about it from the very beginning.
Sure. And I think part of the disconnect that happens is people don't know how to be effectively engaged, or, they don't always know where those resources are or why certain decisions are being made. And, I really value the local government in Orlando, and I think that a lot of the residents here do. I mean, it was cool to see that on Orlando Weekly's publication of the best of, just really singing the praises of the mayor. And it's like, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he's been doing this a long time, and things in the city have been going really pretty well for the most part. I mean, there's always going to be communities that are underserved, and we need to do a better job of that. And I think having honest conversations, he seems like a person who is willing to have those honest conversations, and that's the only way to start working on those kind of things where everybody is getting what they need.
I'm a member of the board of directors of the Florida League of Cities, representing the city of Orlando. It's 400 cities in Orlando, and we all have one common belief, and that comes from Thomas Jefferson, that the government that serves the best is closest to the people, and cities are that way. And so cities get a chance to respond to who's in the city. So the rules and laws that we have in Orlando shouldn't be the same as Panama City, and it shouldn't be the same as Miami. They ought to be independent. But I want to fight for the right for Panama City to have their own rules.
Of course.
Because that's what they want to do. And there's a larger movement above that. Not so much in the counties, but in the state legislature, is that we know what's best for the community, and here's what we're going to do. When you look at Florida is 6 states. It's not one state. It's 6 regions that are independent and unique, and you can't apply any laws, essentially, in the northern portion of the state and think it's going to be done the same way in Miami-Dade.
Right.
It's just not the same. So we have said, then keep your hands out.
Yeah.
Let us do this. I mean, vacation rentals is a good example. Vacation rentals is how much of Panama City makes money. We buy a great house, and now you can rent it out, and isn't that great? Okay. But vacation rentals in Audubon Park is not right.
Right.
It shouldn't be the same. So the city came up with some rules that I think are pretty reasonable, which is if you want to rent out a bedroom in your house, that's great, but you have to be there. Our zoning shouldn't be allowed to be able to take a house and buy it and make it into a hotel.
Sure.
That's not the case.
Right.
But you have a home.
Because it changes the landscape of the neighborhood, and it's like, it might be what some people want to do that, but like it does change an area, and it could happen very quickly. It could just take over and just be like that. Especially
in the world that we live in now. Right. So the idea is I go spend, say, $450,000 for a house in Audubon Park. I mortgage that. That comes back to me about $3,000 a month in mortgage I've got to pay, which is pretty hefty.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, you know what? If I rent out a house for the weekend, I can make $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what? I mean, I can make $8,000 or $9,000 a month on a $3,000 mortgage, and the answer is, well, yeah. Well,
it's a slippery slope. Yeah.
But what about your next door neighbor?
Right.
So we as a city have said, let us make that decision.
Sure.
At the same time, the state has come back almost invariably every year since we did this and said, no, wait a second. Vacation rentals it's your property. There's a thing, and I'll go on a lecture, but I'll stop, but there's a thing called home rule, and that's Jefferson's idea that those decisions are made best locally because we know the decision, and it's home rule. There are legislators at the state of Florida that don't understand home rule, and their definition of a home rule is my home and I can do what I want. That's not a bad concept.
Right.
But the question is, when you say that means your next door neighbor can do what they want too.
Right.
And all of a sudden you don't have this consistency of a neighborhood anymore. What you have is you create hotels. Orlando's got about 2,200 or 2,300 rooms in the core area of Orlando that can be rented out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now imagine if we were to go and set up a new hotel of 2,200 rooms in our town. Wouldn't you require that they have handicap access and adequate parking and proper sound and proper when you look at it as a commercial property and say, hey, you're going to build a 2,200 room hotel, then you're going to have to do some things to be safe, to make sure that people are safe.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden, if you take that 2,200 rooms and say we're going to do one room at a time, then all of a sudden there is no reason for you to have handicap access.
Right.
Because it's your home. Why would you ever do that?
Mm-hmm.
So the state came back and said, let us handle it. Let the Department of Business and Professional Regulation handle that without the state. And we came back and said, no, let the city handle it. We have a zoning department. We have code enforcement. We'll do what we want to do here.
Mm-hmm.
And guys like Airbnb are saying, no, wait a second. I could influence 120 legislators in Tallahassee over a 2-month time period instead of having to influence 400 cities and all of their elected officials.
Yeah.
So they go back and go, no, the state needs to make this decision, and we're going back. No, that's not home rule. Home rule is let us rule it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like what I'm doing, which is, I say this in a kind way, and I don't want somebody to take this wrong, but if you don't like what your elected officials doing, then vote them out.
Right.
We serve at your pleasure. We serve at your leisure.
Right.
And you know what? If we don't agree, I've said from the very beginning, if I don't agree, then go vote me out. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be discouraged by what we attempted to accomplish or what we accomplished while I was in office. Mm-hmm. But if the community is changing and needs somebody else, I'm kind of okay with that.
Right.
Now that's a little different than a lot of people who decide that they want to define themselves by the role, that the title that they have.
Right. And I think that, it's hard to find leaders that are doing it for the reason that you are doing it. And I think it's important to have that type of leadership that understands what it is to serve and understands and wants to understand, the ways of life of the people that you do serve and not leaving any of those 50,000 people out. And I think, it's sort of an ongoing thing in that relationship that we have with our local government here, I think is a pretty healthy one. And as I said, I'm very grateful for that. I wonder, are there ways that communication has been improving over time, or are there ways that you would like to improve that?
Well, we try to survey as much as we can. Mm-hmm. We've done a lot of work around the visioning of Corrine Drive as an example, and Corrine and Forest in Virginia, and then continuing Virginia all the way to Orange Avenue. Mm-hmm. Just some really neat designs. I'm really thrilled about it. It's now in the process of Metro Plan. They've now got it slated for next year to begin design work. So they'll come back to the community with what they've got to get their input on it. Yeah. And then that will then lead to a bid process and lead to construction. So now I will tell you
that's a huge undertaking too, right?
It's a $16 million undertaking to start off today. I mean, and it could be $20 million when it gets done.
Right.
But the idea is that we have screamed and yelled for people to give us their input. We've had meetings with 40, 50, 60 people, which is a pretty good sized meeting. We have surveyed people and got 250 to 300 responses. But I promise you, the moment that the first bulldozer shows up, there will be scores of people who say, "You never told us anything."
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why I think that when you look at this, the idea of a citizen being engaged, it's the idea of being engaged. Now, we want to make sure there's many channels of engagement.
Sure.
Main Street is like the coolest. Neighborhood associations are really cool. The neighborhood watch groups that we have are direct connection into the police department, and that gets to me as well. I mean, that's kind of cool. But if you sit back and just talk to your neighbors and essentially, I know I'm offend somebody, but essentially just whine without trying to get engaged and figure out what's going on, then you can go off the deep end, and people have an opinion. It's okay. It's just not based upon fact. I'm dealing with a lady now who is over in the College Park area, and she is angry because she doesn't want the city to participate in the building of a new or expanded homeless shelter for the Salvation Army. And we just made some changes to our ordinance to allow that to happen. We're kind of excited. They're raising the money. All we're just doing is allowing them to give them permission.
It's so needed, too. It is so needed.
And so her answer is, but no, wait a second. You're building this, in her case, it's 3/4 of a mile from her house. So she feels it's next door. I feel it's a little farther away than she thinks. And she wants to know why in the world we're doing that. And our answer is, well, first of all, they're staying there now on the grass.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because they have no other place to go.
Right.
And so let's see if we can create something that's more humane and in a sense more controlled, and in a sense to be able to provide additional services to get them back out in the community and to get them in a job or get them into medical attention that they need.
Right.
That's what I did for 25 years. So I know this from my very heart. And her opinion is, well, I can't believe you're destroying our city. And I'm thinking to myself,
wow.
This, I think, is the one thing that helps build the structure of our city. Yeah. About where we really want to go.
Compassionate care, absolutely.
Yeah. I was honored to bring to the city the resolution that the city of Orlando become a compassionate city. There are 67 in the country. And the idea is that we declare ourselves as being compassionate, and then making sure that compassion is included in all of the ordinances we deal with, and including all the policies we deal with. And it's a bigger deal than just saying, hey, aren't we sweet and we take care of homeless guys? It's now a section of when you pick up garbage, how does compassion involved in that? And the answer is, well, we started to be more aggressive on contacting senior citizens who can't take their trash to the street. And say, okay, look, we'll do that for you. That's part of but we got to know. Yeah. So let's communicate to you. If you need it, we'll do it. And we do it like all the time. But that was a way of saying, okay, we're going to pick up garbage, but what's a compassionate way to pick up garbage so that we honor people that we're serving?
And not everybody can think outside of their own experience, which is, it's a normal human trait, but, just knowing that, it makes you think about that service in a different way, right? Yeah. Because you're like, I didn't even think about the fact that somebody would need that. But absolutely, it does make sense. And I think that as time goes on and you have more of these experiences and you know other people's stories and you know what they've been through, and people experiencing homelessness, they're going through something very profound, and it's something that we can't necessarily understand firsthand, but to be insensitive to anybody who's experiencing that, I think is just very inhuman and very unkind.
Yeah. Well, that's another podcast for another time.
It is. It's true.
Because I could do that for an hour or so, Michael.
I know.
So don't get me started on that.
Absolutely.
Hey, let me share one thing I think is cool, because one of the things I hate about the government is that everything takes so long.
Yes.
It drives me. You run for office, and you run because you want to get stuff done and get stuff done right away. And the issues, a good example in this community, issues surrounding Virginia and Corrine, I discussed them in 2005. And it's taken that long because the project is that big and that comprehensive. And it's going to take 20 years to get it all done, frankly. But it's also transformational for the next 50 years.
Right.
So I don't feel too bad about doing that.
Yeah.
But we just added the new the Hawk. It's called a Hawk, but the traffic mid-block crossing over on it.
Love it.
It is cool. I mean,
It's the coolest. So it's so weird to get excited about something so simple, but like it's like,
cool.
It's cool. So great. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, and so the community will know. Here's kind of how that happens. We do the vision plan. We look at the vision plan, and I looked at it and said, "Hey, wait a second. Aren't there 2 or 3 things that we can go ahead and do? I know you want to take up the whole road, and that requires stormwater and drainage and sewage, and you got to move the pipes around. I understand that. I understand that Kareem was built to bring in tanks because tanks had to get into the Navy base, and so it's extra wide and it's extra hard base, and I understand all that because I was here a part of it.
Yeah.
But when you look at the things, are there some things that you can do? And so one of the things was the mid-block crossing, and we want to do another one farther down on the other side towards Palmer's. That's the second one we want to try and do. But we designed it in such a way that it fits within the design criteria of what the long-term vision plan is.
The future plan, yeah.
And so the reason is it costs $500,000 to do that. We don't want to tear it up and do it again. Because if the idea is just to put a mid-block crossing and put some lights up, we could have done that 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
But this idea is that we're
do it right this here, the first time, right?
And remember, this is going to last the next 50 years. So let's make sure we do it right. And then we had this new technology that we wanted to try out, which is the Hawk technology. And if you've been on there, you know, you push the button and all of a sudden lights kind of go all crazy. But there's also some other side turning warnings. Have you ever noticed them? Right?
I have.
Okay. So the idea is that when the lights are flashing and you're coming out of the road next to, there's a sign that says "Don't turn left," because essentially there are people in the crosswalk. I guess is kind of what it means.
Yeah. So it's basically a second and third traffic light just for those.
Just for the sides.
Yep.
As opposed to trying to create a complete traffic signal.
And that's such a huge safety thing too. Yeah. I mean, that's
and so
enormous.
The next thing is we can do sidewalks and we can move that forward. Except that remembering that on the north side of the road, from the crosswalk all the way to
Bennett.
Not Bennett. The side road.
Oh, that General Reese.
General Reese. My brain went there. But from there, that's all unincorporated Orange County.
Yes.
And so
this is the north side.
Right, yeah. And so the city wants to put sidewalks in, but we can't put sidewalks in the county.
Oh.
So, county commissioner, come put sidewalks in because guys are walking on the street to get to the crosswalk.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
And I want to do that, but the city. This is county property.
There's only so much that anybody can do because
here's a crazy
of that
idea.
ownership.
Why don't y'all annex into the city and then we'll go do it? I mean, those little cracks in our process push everything so much farther down the line that it drives us all crazy. Because we always want to go get it done.
Right.
And I'm the same way as you are. Let's just go get it done.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
you see a problem, you know what it would take to solve it, but there is red tape, there's paperwork that people don't always realize. That, I mean, the districting maps and the lines of demarcation and that sort of thing. It's just fascinating to see that, and all of it is just kind of history based, and little bits here and there got annexed. Like I remember when the property at East End did, and it changes the rules of the use of that land.
So the idea of the vision plan is that we now own up to the curb. We don't own beyond. We don't own the right of way beyond the curb, but we own up to the curb.
Right.
And now we can go do something.
Okay.
Because that's now in the city. So let's now move down this process.
Yeah.
So as before, we didn't have any of that control, and people don't understand that because we're fighting to get control, and every time we got somebody in the county to say, hey, we'll listen to you. Their answer was, well, we want control, but you can do what you want to on the road, but you have to get our permission. We're like, well, no, we don't want your permission. We're going to go to Metro Plan, and we're going to bring a community engagement moving forward in Metro Plan. I can remember telling a previous county commissioner, when they started raising the ruckus, and the people of the community would come to me and they were screaming at me about what to do there. And I stopped them and said, wait a second, I want you to go look at your tax bill. And they went, why? I said, because when you pay the city and county taxes, 45% of that money that you pay between those two goes to the county. They went, what? Every city resident pays that money to the county. They pay 4.4 mils to the county, 6.6 mils to the city. And they said, well, right, you're paying money into the county on the county road system, and that's a county road. Here's the commissioner's phone number. And they said, well, what would you do? I said, here's what I would do. I'd put a toll gate on Winter Park Drive, and when guys came past Stardust, they would give me money. Because I need money to go do it. So when I eventually got to one of the commissioners, I said, okay, here's the deal. We'll come up with the money. We'll pay 60%. You got to commit to 40%. Give us $5 million. Well, we can't do that. Well, then this project's not going forward. And when they call me, I'm going to ask them to call you, because we're ready to move forward on ours, but we're not going to pay the entire amount on a road that's being used by 40% of the county. That doesn't make sense to us.
Right.
And doesn't make sense to your tax dollars. That makes sense to my tax dollars.
Right.
And so that began the process of saying, oh, he's serious about going to Metro Plan and using the local metropolitan planning organization to bring in the partnerships to make it happen. And that really only occurred a year and a half, 2 years ago, or probably 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
And
the pandemic just add 2 years to everything.
That's right.
At this point.
So we're now moving down that process, and
Right.
I'm really thrilled about that, and thrilled about the community wanting to be engaged, thrilled about what we're seeing, the reaction out here.
Yeah.
And goodness gracious, if I had the money, I'd want to do it all across the board. So.
Of course, yeah. And I remember at some of those planning meetings, when the Metro Plan was published, and people were looking it over, and it was interesting kind of hearing people's opinions about it and concerns and things like that. Obviously, this is going to affect everybody that lives around here or works here, or even just cuts through. I mean, we're like a big cut through area, but making it safer needs to be the priority, and making it safer for both pedestrians and cars is, and making it accessible for everybody, because it is not currently. And it's hard to see those problems go unresolved, but knowing some of the context of just, ownership of the road was the big roadblock, so to speak, for so many years. And even though it was in discussions and, it wasn't even a budget thing, it was just like, we have no way forward on this. Right. So now we do, and now like the wheels are in motion. Yeah. It's very exciting. Very exciting.
The process is Edgewater is moving forward now. Next year, Virginia is moving forward. Now, I know there's a ballot for the transportation tax coming up on the November ballot. If that's approved, all these will be accelerated, which is kind of great, because we'll have the money to do it. The holdup is that you're pooling transportation money from the state and from the county and from the city, and you're getting some projects done. Once you have another revenue stream, it will move much faster. Which I think would be cool, because I think there's some things we want to do there, some things on Edgewater Drive. There's some things over on Virginia and Ivanhoe, just some neat things that will enhance the neighborhood and enhance the ability to bring vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists into an area that they don't typically would come to, because they don't feel safe getting there.
Right. It's interesting that these are all your districts too. I know. There's so much change. So I wonder, in your years of experience, what would be maybe one of the lessons that you had learned from this job that you would want to pass on to future District 3 commissioners?
I think what people want is they want somebody who will listen, and they also want somebody who will be fair in how they respond. This sounds, especially after some of the speeches in the last couple of days, but when I became a district commissioner, everybody in a district was was who I had, who I responded to. I mean, it didn't matter if you voted for me or not. I couldn't tell if you voted for me or not.
Right. You represent all 50,000. Yeah.
And I'm kind of stuck.
Yeah.
But it also means that, as I told people when I ran the first time, we're not going to agree. And it's okay.
Sure.
I don't agree with my wife, and I still live with her. You know, I grew up in a family, and so
if we agree 100% of the time, there's a problem.
Something's wrong.
Somebody's lying to themselves, right?
Wrong.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing applies to. I mean, I grew up in a large, very outgoing, involved family. We didn't agree on these issues. I still don't agree with my brothers and sisters.
But you learned how to disagree, right?
And I also defend the right for them to have their opinion.
Yeah.
And
that's so crucial to respect, right, in
exactly.
that ongoing relationship.
And where it works is that they have to have the same feeling towards you. But it's got to go the other way. So people will scream and yell at me, and the answer is fine. And look, I don't agree. And in a sense, I get to be the commissioner. I don't agree.
Yeah.
But I want to get all the data.
Yeah.
My brain goes when you. This I feel like I'm in a therapy session, Michael.
Sure.
So you're in trouble.
I like it.
Right,
I'm into it. Yeah.
My brain goes to process very quickly. So when you ask me about something, I go, wait a second, how do we get it done? And sometimes in the city, the process is very difficult.
Yeah.
Painting curbs that we tried to do over in Winter Park, in Ivanhoe Village, just to try to curb the parking issues.
Sounds like it should be easy, right?
Took 4 months.
It's paint.
I mean, and I'm thinking, and finally, I eventually said to our staff,
and logically, it makes sense, right?
You know where it needs to go. You know the color that needs to go there. I'm a city employee. Let's go paint.
Yeah.
And their response was, no, Commissioner, we really can't quite do it that way. And I go, I know, but let's get it done. Because that seems to be a pretty simple thing.
Yeah.
But there's 320,000 people in our community. It's 120 square miles of a bunch of stuff going on in our community.
That's a lot of life experiences, right?
And it's 3,300 employees,
Yeah.
and 60% of those employees are public safety. So everybody else, solid waste are smaller, and we have all the same issues that businesses have throughout the entire community.
Right.
We have to. So the idea is set the priority, which is what I've always said from the very beginning. Just tell me when you're going to do it, and I'll. If the answer is you can't paint those for 4 months, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put a tickler on my file. I'm going to call you 4 months from now and ask why they're painted.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you, here's when it's going to be done, and if it's not done. Now, if it doesn't get done, then I'm expecting you as an employee just to tell me what's going on.
Right. That's all.
Don't make
things happen.
Yeah. Don't make me find out some other way.
Sure.
And that's good communication.
Bad news doesn't get better with age.
And I'll tell you, when I'm dealing with the communities, the neighborhoods, that's all they really want.
Yeah.
They know that
two-way communication. Right?
Here's what's going to happen. Here's what we know now.
Yeah.
And if it changes, I promise I'll tell you something different. But this is here's where we're going, and here's how we're moving down this course.
Yeah.
And people go, oh yeah, I kind of appreciate that. That's kind of all I can expect from you. And the answer is, okay, great, let's go do it.
People feel good when they feel heard and valued, and also when they feel informed. And, it's part of your role and responsibility, and you take that part very seriously, to facilitate those three things, right? And just because you are hearing somebody doesn't mean that what they're telling you is going to happen. And that's where people sometimes get spun up, is that they're like, I'm not being heard. It's like, no, I did hear you, but, and maybe here's why we cannot do this.
Well, the other challenge is, remember this, and I'm dealing with the resources of the city.
Right.
I'll share. We'll go on forever if we don't stop.
It's okay. There's no time limit, except for what you need to be doing. So.
When I first got elected, I had not in this neighborhood, so don't anybody take it wrong. Not in the neighborhood. A guy come to me and want me to go and basically take and work on his lake, because his lake was having invasives. And he couldn't get his boat out of his dock into the lake. Okay? And it was our responsibility to do that. So we had sprayed, it didn't work. when you start messing with water, you got to mess with the St. John's Water Management District. You got to mess with. It's just not quite as easy as just going out and doing it.
Sure.
And so we'd struggled. And so about a year later, he came to me and said, "Look, I don't think you understand. There's 39 people on this lake, and we all voted for you, and we're expecting you to do this." And I said, "I don't think you quite understand. The election was 6,000 people, and I need 3,001 votes to win." Okay, that's how many. So I have to be responsible for all 6,000, even the 3,001 that voted for me, and you're 39.
Yeah.
I said, so I'll tell you what you do. If you'll go get the balance of the 3,001 to agree with you, I will change my mind.
Just add some perspective to it, right?
But until then, you're asking me to take money from people in Baldwin Park and Audubon Park and spend it someplace else. Where is their benefit in that?
Right.
If they don't have a benefit, then it's not a good use of tax dollars. So we'll get to it. We'll get to it in the time we can. We have 120 lakes in our town. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to be patient. And his answer was, "I cannot believe the way you're treating me." And I'm going, I don't know. I'm just telling you what the facts are.
Right.
And I don't have an opinion. I would like to have a budget that covers every question that people ask me. I'd like to have a bunch of people that work underneath me, that when they want to have a traffic problem, I run them outside and they go do stuff, and then I hire them and fire them. I mean, that's what I would like. But that's not how the city runs. The city runs in a larger perspective for the benefit of 320,000 people and 40 billion visitors that come through our airport.
Yeah.
So it's just not quite as simple as, that. Now, on the other side, the city's greatest role that we do is wastewater.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, if something happens tomorrow and you can't flush your toilet, I'm telling you, the world will come unglued. Look at Jackson, Mississippi right now.
It's just a tragedy what is taking place there.
Infrastructure is very important, and we've spent a lot of money and energy and effort in doing that. The same with picking up trash. I tease our trash guys, and they're kind of like the old days in Ivory soap. They're 99 and 44 100% pure. They do it right, 99 and 44 100% of the time.
Sure.
But they pick up 20,000 locations in the course of a week.
And you're only going to notice if something doesn't.
If somebody gets picked up, they call me, and all of a sudden, people now, and I don't know why they do this, but people now feel like I have singled that person out.
Yeah, you've done them wrong, and you went out of your way to do it, and you're going to hear about it.
And I'm looking from an operation standpoint, saying, you picked up 10,000 people on Monday, and you missed 5. You did a great job.
Yeah.
Now, how do we get these 5 back in the fold?
Right. That's the part that where people feel heard and seen, and all of those.
So how do you get them back in there? And in many occasions, the answer is because somebody parked in front of your trash can. You didn't realize it because they were visiting your house, and when we came by, we couldn't get to the trash can.
Right. And then, if it was an oversight, not repeating that mistake, and that's part of the operational piece of it. It's that you're not seeing these problems every week.
But remember the city. We often look at city as how we touch them last. So you have stormwater, you have wastewater, you have traffic. You have police and fire. And so that's how we see the city. But the city is much broader. It's 3,400 people employed. It's a $1.5 billion budget. It's some of the best venues in the entire country. And all that is built into the same city. And my job is to make sure you feel as engaged in the city, frankly, as I do.
Absolutely. And that's so important to lead by example too, right? So. Yeah. And then we have, on top of all of that, we have all of these externalities of, climate change, of, keeping the environment safe and doing that. And these things that some of which we have very little control of. So we just have to sort of adapt to what is happening to the environment around us. And as you said, some state legislation as well that's coming down. And you're just okay, this seems to be designed to harm people. Yeah. You're singling out people and it's hard to watch that in our home state. And I know that our local government is not that way, and they're very vocal about not being that way.
Yeah.
And, being inclusive and representative and, believing in equity, all of those things. It's like, that is part of being a public servant. And it's at the heart of it. If you're not doing that, then you're not actually doing your job. So,
but I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
This really has been a pleasure. And for people that want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
The best way is to contact the office. Okay. And the fastest way is really by email. So it's robert.stuart, Stuart, at orlando.gov. And that goes right to my hip. Mm-hmm. And then... as I've done for 16 years, if I know the answer, I'm going to answer. If I don't, I'll send it to somebody, let you know about it. We'll get you an answer. If you don't get an answer in a timely manner, then let me know. We'll get you an answer. But any other questions that anybody has, I want to make sure they're engaged.
Absolutely.
And I want people to get engaged also in their own community. Mm-hmm. I get a call probably
once. That's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
It needs to.
Once or twice a week, I get a call from somebody and say, I just moved into town. How do I get engaged? Well, okay, where are you? Okay, here's this, go this. I mean, it's just really kind of a neat way to kind of plug people in.
Yeah.
New businesses and those kind of things. So I think it's a matter of getting engaged. The easiest, fastest way to get engaged in the community is a school. Mm-hmm. The second easiest is the faith community. Mm-hmm. But the city has put in the areas like Main Street and others that offer other ways to get engaged. Mm-hmm. If you want to get engaged, start a neighborhood watch group in your town and on your street. And I promise you, we'll get there. We'll be there as quick as we can.
Lately, in this neighborhood, also potlucks have become a pretty popular thing.
Cool.
Just doing like a dinner, gathering somewhere where neighbors meet, and just those little grassroots things. I had a really great conversation with Pastor Sarah Robinson at the Covenant Church over here.
Her.
She's incredible. I mean, just absolutely such a connector. So many great ideas, such great energy. Like, she's really putting it all into practice. And that's the kind of leadership that like really does make a community sustainable. And she's been here almost a decade now as well, doing good things for the community, not just, her church. It's like she understands that connection that people have to this experience here and the environment. And it all feeds into this, this way of life that we appreciate. And it's the reason that housing prices are what they are. I mean, it's sort of hard to navigate that because you're like, who can afford these houses? And I know that that's, part of just the economy and some externalities.
I wish that were an Orlando problem because we go find who's doing it right and fix it.
Sure.
But that is an issue. I've saw it in like Idaho, and the whole town in Idaho is just blowing up, and
who can afford to live there, right? Yeah. I did want to talk about that a little bit, if you have the time. Just the housing prices and the affordability and just kind of what it all comes together of the wages of jobs and all of these things that people need to be able to afford to live here, and it's. The bubble of 2008 happened, and we know, people are speculating about maybe another one. And I wonder kind of if there are any things that can be done about that, what those would be.
Well, I think you have to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. So first perspective is the wage. So the city worked hard to make sure that we moved our minimum wage to $15 an hour. Mm-hmm. Livable wage is about $16.50 an hour. Our average livable wage in the city is about that rate. So you start at 15 and go a little bit higher.
Sure.
We've now made some changes inside the city to take our seasonal people and move them to the same rate. Before they didn't qualify for minimum wage, and so we've now moving them up. So that's the first section. You got to pay them well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what happens is that in the community is that as they get paid well, then all of a sudden everything else seems to go up in price to match that.
That money has to come from somewhere. Right.
In housing today, it costs about $270,000, maybe $265,000 to build a home.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's not including the land price.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that's the cheapest way to do it, and that typically is an apartment complex. So you're looking at, let's just say, $250,000 per unit. You go back and look at, if you were to mortgage that at today's rates, then all of a sudden now you're at $1,800-$1,900 per month.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, mysteriously, that's about what the starting rate of an apartment complex is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's because they're all trying to make money the same
their
way.
Price point, right?
And we've got to figure out how to build stuff cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
We just did a project, and it's just started literally like this week, over at the Ambassador Hotel on Colonial Drive in Westmoreland.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a group in town that's done this about 8 or 9 times throughout the country, throughout the state. And they take an old hotel and convert it to affordable housing. Mm. So they take it down to its bones, rebuild it back up, and then make it into affordable housing with the ability to have counseling and other services available there. So you rent for a year now. Mm-hmm. It's if you qualify for subsidy, you get it. If not, and it's the rates start now at about $690 and go to about $1,400 because you haven't got to do all the things you would have to do to build the apartment that's going to be across the street from them in a sense.
Right.
And so now all you got to do is just make it look presentable to the community, so it doesn't look like it's in the old days slum housing.
Right.
So they've done a lot of really neat things to accomplish that. When that gets done, there's going to be 180 apartments that are affordable apartments there.
That's incredible. That's so helpful.
Now, I think that model it's not an unusual model. We just found a company who we think we trust doing it. Mm-hmm. That could happen all throughout. I mean, you could take 10% of our entire stock and convert it from weekly housing to affordable housing, and just have some fun with it. You could do a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing the city can do, and so we're helping them with some money that we got through the ARCA funds, essentially. That we can use for housing. So we're calling that as part of housing. So we're putting that there. We're also helping with some areas in terms of emergency housing, like with the Salvation Army and the Coalition for the Homeless and the Christian Service Center. They're doing some emergency housing, and then we've also set aside some money to help keep people in their home. If we can keep people in their homes, it is 10 or 15 times more efficient than having them go on the street and then go find a place.
Of course.
So we put a lot of energy into we probably did $35-40 million worth of money that went out to help pay for people to stay in their homes. And that money's coming to an end, and we're hoping that kind of these will work together.
Yeah.
But Central Florida needs 80,000 affordable housing units. And every time,
that's quite an undertaking. Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. Now, by the way, it's this way all in the Sun Belt. It's not just Orlando. It's people are moving south.
Yeah.
And
you can pretty much live outdoors year round, and it's you're not going to die from the winters. You may be uncomfortable in the summer, but
you pay $450,000 for an Audubon Park.
Yeah.
It costs you about $35,000 in Detroit.
Wow.
Okay, so people are leaving, and as they leave, the market begins to fluctuate with that. So we're hoping. I'm not trying to. I've never hoped for 2008, 2009, but we're hoping that this slowing down of the economy is going to get everybody to kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, where do we need to go?
Like not a crash, but a correction, perhaps. Yeah.
And housing is going to be that key area. The other part of that area is education. So the city has nothing to do with that except to do all we can in areas like the Creative Village to be able to make sure that people are educated, they can move faster.
Like and then funding special programs like that.
The last is transportation.
Yeah.
We have 1/3 the number of buses that Phoenix has. So when you go back and look at this transportation that we're doing, we've now created the spine of our system, which is Sunrail. We've got to get it to run more often. It just costs money. We got to figure out how to put a dedicated source there. I've been saying it for 16 years. I need a dedicated transportation source. This one penny for 20 years could do that.
Yeah. Well worth it.
The other part is links. So now you turn to links and go, okay, links, we need to beef up your stuff. It takes an hour and a half for somebody who lives in downtown Orlando to go to their maid job or service job
Yeah.
in Disney.
That's unacceptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they work there 8 hours.
That's a half an hour drive, right?
Right. Then they work there for 8 hours and then come back home.
Yeah.
Now, so you're gone effectively 11, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
How do you raise a family when the breadwinner's gone 11 hours a day?
Yeah.
So we have to figure out.
And that's a lot of
what's the
people's
solution.
only mode of transportation.
Exactly.
So
you got to boost that up.
Yeah.
And then the last is we got to boost up the roads themselves,
Mm-hmm.
so they can take these. The idea is that I think there are people in your neighborhood. I think the people who do it already, who want to ride their bike downtown,
yeah.
and they can't do it today.
Yeah.
So what do? They jump in a car. All of a sudden, everybody and their brother is now in the car trying to get someplace. We've got to come up with these modes of transportation so that people are using the roads because they need to,
Mm-hmm.
not because they have to,
Right. Right.
or because they want to, I should say. So
Yeah.
Anyway, so all that to be said, that we have to approach it in that way, and we have to work with the county to accomplish the same thing because they have exactly the same problems we have.
Right.
We have to figure out how to get the state more engaged in that, especially in terms of transportation.
Right.
The state has a fund called the Sadowski Fund. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that,
Mm-hmm.
but back about 30 years ago, back when my brother was in the Senate,
Yeah.
they took a portion of the sale of every piece of property in the entire state of Florida and put it into a fund. You pay like $3 or $4 per sale.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
When you get through, and in the course of a year, there's $500 million in the fund.
Wow.
Okay. And the fund was designed to say, okay, we're all going to contribute to affordable housing. So this is one way, when you buy your house, this is one way you contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And now that money then is supposed to be repurposed back to the local community so they can build affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
When Scott was was governor, he took all that money and said, I'm not going to raise taxes in the state of Florida. And and took all that money from the Sadowski Fund and put it in general revenue.
Mm.
Okay. I think that's abusive. I don't think you should do that.
Absolutely.
DeSantis has taken the money and said, okay, we're going to do it for housing, but what we're going to do is we're going to take it and use it for the people who've been impacted by a hurricane up in the Panhandle because they need housing. We're going to put the money up there, and then we'll put some other money some other place. And I'm going, well, that's great. You've done great, a lot more than the previous, but there already is emergency money for housing in another fund.
Yeah.
This is designed for something else.
It's moving things around inappropriately.
Exactly.
Right?
And
Mm-hmm.
so he's made a step forward.
Yeah.
But for us as cities have all said that's not enough.
Yeah.
What would happen if we as cities knew that there was $500 million available for the next 4 years, for the next 4 years?
That would be huge.
All of a sudden we'd turn and go, wait. Well, Orlando, how are you going to get it to us? Okay, Orlando, here's 50 million that you can have. Great.
Yeah.
Well, now all of a sudden that $250,000 cost per unit now drops to about 170, 180. And now you could begin to start doing affordable housing because you've driven that price down without having to have the guys who sell it make excess money. We're just going to drive it down by having a supplement coming someplace else.
Everyone
and then you can
wins.
move faster.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the stuff that we're involved in.
Yeah.
That we're trying to say, look, let's do it right. And so
Right.
anyway, I know I'm going to make somebody angry because they think I'm yelling at DeSantis, and he's done a ton more than what Scott has done. But there's still a lot more to be done.
Yeah, and it shows a tangible example of what people don't always see in the inner workings of things, and how budget constraints and color of money and those things like play into it. And then you always hear about abuses, but you very rarely hear about like efficient government doing what it's supposed to.
Right.
And like if you're not hearing about government, it's probably because they're doing their job, and that's a good thing.
That's exactly the case. It's been great to spend time with you.
You as well,
I appreciate
Robert.
it.
I
Thank you
really,
very
really
much.
appreciate it.
And love what you're doing in the community. Love your
Thank you.
leadership. And,
Thank you.
And love your example to everybody else that's in our community. Thank you very, very much.
It is very mutual, and thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good, thank you.
Hello, APGD. A neighborhood podcast is brought to you in part by Stardust Video and Coffee, Audubon Park's beloved neighborhood cafe, bakery, bar, and meeting place, located at 1842 East Winter Park Road. We're also sponsored by Red Light Brew Pub. Founded in 2005, Red Light is widely known as the source for world-class imports and microbrews. A wide selection of natural wines, plus award-winning beers brewed in-house. A full kitchen is in the works with an amazing menu by Chef Jess Tantalo. Located at 2810 Corinne Drive, please check out Red Light for all things beer and wine and soon food. Our theme song is by Christopher Pierce, and special thanks to Trey Hester for all of his help in making this podcast a reality. We do hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please click subscribe and leave a review if you'd like. We'll see you next time.